Ian, can I get a photo of you in front of your opening slide?
Oh, well done.
Oh, you look great. 1, 2, 3. And get a little close. Can you actually stand a little close? Perfect.
Wow.
1, 2,
Guys, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Please.
Gemini is freaking unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Are you talking
I
about?
haven't messed around with Gemini as much yet. Yeah.
I just told it to change the tone so it's a client telling me this story instead of in the tone of a hypothetical.
Yeah.
That John, honestly, I'm still so mad about it. That is exactly how a client sounds, if you're wondering. You know, I hired him to do some, what the, this is really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jobs.
I still haven't finished the Gen AI 101 class. I started it.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think people are excited, so maybe we can get started even a minute early, dare we?
I think we're exactly on time. First question, most important, classic question. Can internet people hear me? Hear us? Great. Okay, this is the first presentation in a research series this year, I think. Today's presentation is by Patricia Vargas, who is a cybersecurity researcher, postdoctoral fellow here at Ostrom, a visiting scholar in the Internet Governance program at the Catholic University of Uruguay, and a visiting fellow at the Information Society project at Yale Law School. Her research mostly focuses on the intersection of law and policy, in the realm of internet governance, cybersecurity, and international law. And international law of the sea, interestingly. She was a consultant for the United Nations Division for Ocean Affairs and the Law of the Sea, and has served as Google Policy Fellow. Today's presentation, titled "A Tale of Two Nation-States Government-Controlled Internet Blackouts," for me sounds very interesting. I read the abstract and I tried to research a bit the background of the presentation. And the incident, which Patricia will tell more about, is actually very, very interesting. It will be very interesting also for my next week presentation. So I was super interested in actually. My approach to it and my question will be more about the compensation part, which is not what Patricia main topic is, but I think it's a very interesting realm and part of the issue here. The main problem, as I understand it, is about this balance and weighing the security and human rights in case of a state-induced internet blackout, which is fascinating. Like this one sentence, I think, in my opinion, makes it super interesting topic. And I think I will give the voice back to give the floor to Patricia, and let's hear the presentation.
Thank you.
Yay!
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, to the people here and to the people online. It's a pleasure to see many of you. I truly appreciate the opportunity of sharing my work and you taking the time to join me today. So, we are going to talk about internet blackouts. I have a problem. I cannot.
Oh, do we need help with advancing?
Oh, there you go.
go.
This is the agenda that I expect to fulfill today. So as you can see, you will speak more than me. That would be nice if it were true. Now, here I want to make an important decision about the title of this project. This is first not a research paper. It's a project to write a book. The intro part is finished. I'm going to talk to you about 2 of the chapters. The project has been part of my life for a few years now. You will see some graphics that probably some of them have been published, but they need improvement and they need to be updated. So we are going to talk now, first of all, about the definition. Exactly what am I going to talk to you about today? Here. I want to be clear as to what do I mean by internet blackouts. This is a definition created by the Internet Society, ISOC, in 2017. to define what an internet blackout is, but they use the term full internet shutdown. This is the disruption of the whole internet and the electronic communications, making them inaccessible to a population within a geographic region or nation state. I want to be here very clear. I will not be speaking about disruption of specific applications or web pages, because in my opinion, those are cases of censorship, which is a very different situation in legal, economical, political, and technical terms. So I'm not talking about WhatsApp, Facebook, LinkedIn, or anything like that. I might use the term internet shutdown just to refer to specific documents or sources. So now we are going to talk a little bit about and why it became so important. On April 1st, 2009, during one of the sessions of the US Congress, two senators, one Democrat and one Republican, who were very much in agreement, introduced the bill S773, titled Cybersecurity Act of 2009. This bill will be the first formal attempt to grant powers to the President of the United States to shut down the internet within the United States territory. This is the first time the term internet shutdown was used in a legal document. And it was used to refer to an internet blackout or to a full shutdown, not in reference to any specific instances where some information sources became inaccessible. Now, how do we define an internet blackout? What is exactly what I mean by this, or by a full shutdown according to the terminology of the Internet Society? These are some of the definitions that are available in the literature. Three of them according to the perspective under analysis. The first one, defined in legal terms, refers to the protection of the critical infrastructure. This is a term, a concept very often considered and cited in national security and in cybersecurity. The critical infrastructure is defined as the set of interconnected systems which are vital for the survival and stability of a nation state. In the United States, the Presidential Policy Directive number 2021 identifies 16 critical sectors as part of the critical infrastructure. The next definition, well, is in terms of political authority, who can order a blackout. And the last one is just a definition in technical terms, as how is the situation when an internet blackout takes place. Now, this is the definition, but how exactly an internet blackout can be achieved? This is a question that is extremely important, because each step of the process to achieve a blackout has to have or must have a correlation in a legal document or a public policy decision. So, an internet blackout implies the interruption of the transference of the internet data packets from sender to receiver at a big scale, a process controlled by the TCP/IP protocol, which is what you have in there. The protocol guarantees that the receiver gets what the user sends, even back and forth. Whoever wants to alter the transmissions of the internet packets in a particular geographic location must control at least 5 elements that support the proper functioning of the internet protocol. I will go very quickly on them because we don't have much time. The internet service providers, the internet exchange points, the subsea cables, the domain name system, and the border gateway protocol. These are the acronyms. Now, I will go very quickly about each one of them. Internet service providers is just a company that provides you the service. The internet exchange points. The function of an IXP is to allow the internet networks to interconnect directly or to exchange traffic and to facilitate the exchange of the information packets among the ISP. So the IXP serve in the first place to the internet service providers and then to the rest of the networks. Interrupting the proper functioning of the IXPs has a heavy and a direct impact on the internet traffic. Next, internet cables, they transfer around the 90% of the internet traffic today. Even though there is satellite internet, the heavy flow of the internet traffic relies on the cables, on the subsea cables. The next one is the domain name system. This is a protocol that is not very well known by people who are not in the internet governance or the cybersecurity area. But this is a protocol that translates a 10 or 12 digit number, which points to the IP address, into something the human brain can remember. Every time a user wants to access a website, it's very difficult that that person is going to be remembering 10 or 12 numbers. But the brain of that person can remember something like google.com or something.com. The DNS is also known as the phone book of the internet because it matches number and IP address. Now, the border gateway protocol complements the functions of the IXPs. It makes it possible for the internet service providers to connect to each other and for the end users to connect to more than one internet service providers. When all these elements are compromised and the traffic is heavily affected at the point of disappearing, the engineers have coined a term called the internet prefixes are down. And we may say that we are facing an internet blackout. Now, very often I get a question, so Patricia, somebody has achieved an internet blackout. That's an interesting question, but it also deserves an interesting answer. 100% of success is extremely difficult, but it's not the same to try to do this, to try to achieve a blackout in the United States than trying to do it in Somalia, in Eritrea, or in Brazil, just here in the Americas. So the next question is now, who in the world are trying to achieve an internet blackout and who has discussed about this possibility? So this is a timeline of what happened between 2005 and 2012. In the upper part, you see the names of the nation states where an internet blackout occurred. And in the lower part, the names of the nation states where there was a political, legal, or academic debate on the subject. To classify these regimes, I want to be clear, I didn't know this on my own. I used the democracy index of the Economist of the Intelligence Unit and the 60 indicators to put a nation state into a specific category. Now, according to the classification, in 7 non-democratic regimes, there was an internet blackout. In 2 democratic regimes, there was a discussion and a decision about the subject. And in 1 democratic regime, this is Australia, the government claimed an accident. This will keep happening. This is a pattern in Australia, has blackouts constantly, specifically located in different regions. And it's always an accident. Now, in all these episodes, the blackouts were a direct consequence of a government decision who has a fair amount of control over the internet infrastructure, except Australia, as I just said. Now, this is the situation now between 2013 and 2019 and 2024. I cannot do a nice graphic because the cases are just too many. So between 2013 and 2018, approximately 13 nation states, there was an internet blackout. In those cases, there were episodes where government decided to act on the internet infrastructure to provoke a blackout. This is the column in blue. For the column in green, basically Australia and Indonesia, they will claim the blackouts were consequence of a natural disaster or an accident. As I said again, in Australia, this will keep happening and happening. Now, some nation states will do it more than once, and some will do it concentrated in a specific city or region, and some will do an internet blackout at a national level. Between 2019 and 2024, the situation got even more complicated. Right? In this case, in over 30 regimes, there was an internet blackout because of direct actions of the government. In approximately 41 regimes, there was a blackout for multiple reasons not related to a direct action of the government, or at least that is the explanation that these particular governments or entities are giving us. Some of the scenarios include the need to save energy, illegal occupation or illegal annexation, case of Crimea, some of the cities of Ukraine, claims of a technical accident or natural disaster. The Caribbean area is a clear example of that. Internet infrastructure destroyed by an armed conflict, again, Ukraine or Palestine. The disruption occurred because of the internet trafficking in another nation state suffered, and then the traffic got interrupted somehow. Now, extremely disrupted cyber attacks is happening in New Zealand, just regular maintenance or vandalism and cable damage. Now, some nation states are in both lists. For instance, Cuba suffered a blackout because of a government decision and then because one of the hurricanes came and destroyed part of the internet infrastructure. Now, there is a very important point here, and it's part of a geopolitical problem today. Since 2024, there is a huge increase in the episodes of cable destruction or vandalism, which represents a substantial change from previous years. Why is this important? Most of the cables have a lifespan of 25 years. The first internet cables, or most of the internet cables that are in the planet today, were built in the early 2000s. They are reaching the end of their life. And there is a huge competition between the United States and China to take the contracts all over the planet to build and to replace the new cables. Now, we are going to talk about, we have to assess about the United States and Russia. We just don't have the time to talk about everybody else. No, so when I started this project, the idea was to talk about the democratic regimes and the hybrid regimes, to make a difference of the traditional studies that only look into authoritarian regimes. While I was working on the project, the US and Russia suffered a change in their classification, right? The US moved from being a consolidated democracy to be a floated one. That is the term of the economists. It's not something that I created myself. I rather call it non-consolidated
The
democracy.
theme for the year is democracy and trust in institutions. So this is a great point to start with.
And Russia changed from being a hybrid regime to be an authoritarian.
Pretty accurate.
Mm.
It's been close by.
Now, there is a red X in there. Why is this? So far, the Russians were censoring the internet, but they did not execute a blackout within its own territory, within their own territory. However, around 2 weeks ago, there have been some reports of a blackout, but I'm not 100% sure yet if they were blackouts or they were more episodes of censorship. Until I do it, I'd rather keep the X in red. Okay, so we are going to see now more in deep each case. This is the United States of America. They have had 4 bills, 3 in the Senate and 1 in the House of Representatives, trying to give powers to an authority to shut down or to enact an internet blackout within the United States territory. The first one, 2009, was plain and simple. The president can declare a national emergency and order the internet to be put down or to order an internet blackout. The second one changed the text. The president can declare a national cyber emergency, and owners and operators of critical infrastructure must be in compliance with any measure, including the blackouts. The third one, the first 2 had a lot of backlash from the civil society because of the potential impact on the human rights, and because the limits of the authority, whether it was the president or another member of the executive, was not clear. Then, and finally, we have the third one, which follows more or less the same terminology. The president or any civil servant is not allowed to declare a blackout, but a new authority created, the NECC director, he is allowed to do so. So we are going back and back into the same. The last bill, which was from the House of Representatives, tried to reduce the limits to declare an internet blackout to protect the freedom of expression. It's not human rights, it's the freedom of expression only, but yet it left the possibility of giving to the president the powers for a blackout if the security of the nation state was at stake. Now, none of these bills pass, but it's in the mindset, and they have said so, of the members of the executive and several members of the Congress, if not near to the 100%, that if the circumstances demand so, the president has the authority to do this, has the authority to declare a blackout. The legal basis is the telecom law from 1934, specifically the word powers of the president, which basically tell us that the president can decide to undertake policies just like a blackout if the national security demands it. Now, let's go with the Russians. How am I in time? Okay, so in 2013, there were massive protests online and offline, and the Russian Congress started to enact several laws to compromise each of the 5 elements that I just mentioned that allow the internet protocol to function properly. The amount of the bills and laws they created was so much and so fast that the Moscow Times coined the term blitzkrieg laws over the internet infrastructure in reference to the lightning war of the World War II, advance fast, strong, and steady. Once they had too many of these bills as law, they enacted the so famous 2019 Russian sovereign internet law. Basically, in the event of a national security situation, the government can take control of the Russian-hosted internet infrastructure and redirect all domestic internet traffic to servers within the country. Russian operators need to comply with any order that comes from the executive. The power here is crystal clear. It's from the executive. It's not from anybody else. According to the Russian mindset, the control of RUNET, which is the name for the Russian internet, will provide a degree of resilience against the cyber attacks that come from foreign powers. It's always blaming the unpredictable West. They also believe that by closing international connections, the traffic from abroad can be better monitored and filtered as they see fit. Now, what we see here in the case of Russia is a 20-year effort to build, 1, political and legal rhetoric, and 2, a strong national infrastructure to subordinate the Russian internet to the political power in that nation state. Furthermore, when talking about the internet blackouts, the Russians handle a double perspective that is very difficult to read unless one reads again and again the text they have created. They believe that a blackout is an acceptable form of policy if the government does it to preserve their national security. This is the Russian government. But it is not an acceptable form of policy if it's consequent of attack of what they call the unpredictable West. Now, let's go to the political narrative, which is one of the questions that was also described in the abstract. There are 4 variables which are key components. The fear of a cyber attack over the critical infrastructure. This is an agreement between the 2 of them. The fear to protect the critical infrastructure for both the US and Russia. However, there's an important distinction to make. In the United States, the critical infrastructure is mostly owned and controlled by the private sector. The US government has to make partnerships to protect them. Differently in Russia, the critical infrastructure is to some extent owned by the Russian government, or 2, owned by the private sector, but it's a private sector that is heavily subordinated and controlled by the government. Second, the fear of a foreign attack. This is a characteristic of the authoritarian regimes from the non-democratic regimes. Russia is not the only one. You will see it in some of the countries of the Middle West. You will see it in Venezuela. Always the evil ones are the ones, is always the evil ones. The evil one is the unpredictable West. The idea that the enemy is the foreign power, never somebody from inside. The use of the social platforms or message systems during times of national unrest. This is also a coincidence in the same rhetoric. The possibility of having a situation of national security created by riots is a constant concern in both nation states. And we know that the riots are very well organized through the social networks. So there is also, this is part of the discourse. There was an episode in 2019 Not very well known. It's an episode that happened in the Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's BART. This is the Transportation Authority of the state of California in San Francisco. Now, there was an episode where a homeless person is murdered by the police, and there are some protests that are organized, like it happens sometimes. Unfortunately, when the protests were organizing, all the internet communications in the facilities were down, and it was also down over several miles around the facility. We never knew what happened. The ACLU made a FOIA request to know exactly what happened. The request, an administrative request that went down up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court refused to request the NSA to reveal exactly what happened, what did they do to have the internet down in so huge extension of territory. Now, this is the United States. In the case of Russia, this scenario is different. The new law from 2018 gave the authority to the government to act over any site with more than 3,000 visitors per day, including the social networks. Finally, we have the claims of national sovereignty over the internet infrastructure. This is also a common element among the rhetorics of both nation states. This is a tendency also known as cyber nationalism. There are constant claims of national security over the internet, and also, and this is very important, there are some calls to make the cyberspace a national asset. This is very unclear. What means to make the cyberspace a national asset? This is in the language of the US, and it's also in the language of Russia. And finally, and here is where we can start seeing some differences, which is in the technical overview. The internet service providers, between 1 and 4, control the 70% of the national internet traffic. This is a common characteristic here in the United States, and so is in Russia. What are the differences? That the FCC in the United States oversees the practices of the ISPs, but rarely interferes. In the case of Russia, Rostelecom not only oversees the ISPs, but it's also allowed to interfere in the ISPs' practices. More important, the internet exchange points. The United States has 2,021. Russia has 43. 43 is a very small amount for such a vast territory. Moreover, in the United States, the ISPs are not under any government control. And sometimes the FCC rarely interferes, but this is mostly to avoid the concentration of monopolies within the networks that appear in the ISPs. In Russia, very different scenario. The new law is the only statutory provision at a global level that gives the control to the ISPs to the government. And finally, related to the DNS, the US relinquished any interference over the DNS, while Russia wants to copy all the addresses and ISPs, all the addresses and the IP addresses, and control the DNS if they can do so. This is my last slide related to the conclusions. Well, as we can see, the governments never discarded this form of extreme government control. Doesn't matter if they are democracies or not. There are strong similarities in the narratives of the US and Russia, whether we like it or not. No? All regimes fear the social networks and have concerns over the critical infrastructure. In the US, an internet blackout has been justified as a form of national security policy that attempts to guarantee the survival of the nation state. In Russia, an internet blackout as a form of national security policy attempts to guarantee the survival of a regime that has been in power over 20 years. And finally, as I just showed you, an internet blackout concentrates a lot of power in one authority, usually the president. We have to think how much of these type of policy decisions affect the open architectural design of the internet, and how much it may take from us a free and open internet as we have become today. And I'm done.
Thank you. The bar is pretty high for me for the next week because with the time management.
Okay, so now I will give a short comment. Actually, I have one very elaborate one, but I will try to do it quick, and then I will give the voice to you. Please, people on the internet, please raise your hands. I will try to track it and give you voice if you want to say something. On my side, what was the most interesting? Everything is interesting about this for me, especially dealing with like cybersecurity and all that. What was the most interesting part for me was this like the notion of the transition from censorship through like I would call them maybe like hybrid solutions. I noted the firewall example, like a Chinese wall. What China has in regards to their internet, which is kind of mix of the things you mentioned, which could amount to blackout, but they also include some of the like censorship solutions. So those are like the hybrid approaches. And the last stage is like a full blackout, which you were talking about. This is like me trying to like conceptualize this in like sort of like a gradual typology of the issue. And this kind of translates to the other part. Because if we are looking at the world today, if we're looking at China, Russia, US, just to take those three states and Ukraine in that regard, all of like everything what you said, it applies to like a peace state, I think, and there's like tension, but there is this whole tension, but it is applicable to like critical infrastructure and things that happen during peacetime. I wonder what happens with that approach, with the blackout approach during a war, and during like an armed during like an armed conflict, to be more precise and more modern with the international law wording. Because, for example, what you said about US, there is this difference between Russia and US, that Russia has everything more centralized. They can exercise the power over the internet providers more easily, as also in the case you mentioned in an abstract, the Egypt case. It was very visible that they can exercise this power over the internet providers in the country. But I wonder, like looking at history, especially, for example, the history of a US government relation to the industry during like the Second World War and how it gradually evolved, whether is there really a difference in peacetime? There is an obvious difference, of course, but during the war and like the higher stages of tension that will, I hope not, but might happen in the future. Will there really be a difference, for example, between the US or EU in that case? Because in EU there are some initiatives which are called like digital sovereignty policies. There are some initiatives that are similar to that, actually. Do you think it can evolve into something very similar in both democratic countries and authoritarian countries in case of the global tension rising? So the two issues, basically, the typology, like the evolution from censorship through like firewall, like Chinese wall approach to blackout, and the other part, the evolution in terms of the war.
Well, I'll try to respond. So China, the Great Wall of China is not an episode similar to a blackout. It's an episode similar to an isolation, like the Russian isolation policy. One thing is to create, to manipulate these 5 elements that support the internet protocol to keep the traffic within your own territory, to isolate your own traffic from the rest of the world. The internet is still running.
Yeah, but isn't it there, because I was reading about this Egypt case, from what I understand, what they did was they blocked Egypt from the rest of the world, like they blocked the connection points.
No, so that's not exactly. You see, what happened in Egypt is they had the internet down, but not at a national level in only one instance. They will move from Cairo to another city and to another and to another until there was a point that after 9 days, they could no longer do it because the economy was just not taking it anymore. That's why the internet blackouts do not happen one of the many reasons why they don't happen that often is because the national economies cannot handle it. And this is the mindset, the silly mindset of some governments. They believe that if they go through the internet service providers and maybe through the internet exchange points, they have the situation under control. That's not true. You have three other elements you can work with. I mean, the internet is going to suffer. The traffic will decrease severely. But this is a funny case. It happened in Venezuela. You know, in 2013 or 14, I don't know, but somewhere around. Just to give you a clear idea, they only have one exchange point. So they was easily to go and take it. They only have one internet service provider. It was easy to go and take it. So the city that was giving them more problems was a city that was neighboring with Colombia. So what the people did, just walk very close to the border and get the signal from the Colombian side. So these civil servants have a very low understanding of how they can achieve this policy.
Yeah, like in North Korea, people hiding in the mountains with their phones. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
okay.
If you have a satellite phone, then there's really no purpose in any of this. The satellite phone,
Yeah.
you always will have signal, right? But how many people have a satellite phone in North Korea or in Venezuela or here in the US by any means? No, but that's what I'm trying to tell you. The China situation is more a case of an isolation than a blackout. Now, the second question, the armed conflict. I'm not sure if I understood you well, but I'm going to say what I think it's the answer. So first of all, the blackouts are the children of the Westphalian model, right? Which basically says a government on behalf of the nation state can create jurisdiction to control the population and everything that happens within the borders of its own territory. A blackout being one of those examples. In the case of the United States, similar situations have occurred during the World War II, actually during the World War I. If you make a study of the communications within the World War I, the internet war periods, and the World War II, you will see that the US government took the communications, the control of the communications many times, because it serves to what they believe was to keep to keep safe and stable the nation state. They will do it again? I think they will. They will now. Will they go for a blackout? I don't think so, for two reasons. One, in the United States, achieving an internet blackout is extremely difficult. It's just a massive network, very difficult to control of it. Second, now, differently from 2011, when this happened, 2011, yes, when this happened in Egypt, the idea that if there is an attack of a specific sector of the critical infrastructure, now it's easier to identify the sector and isolate it, rather than having everything done. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay.
We have a tradition of opening up to students first, but there's not as many right now, but there's some. So if any of you guys have questions to begin with, that'd be great. Otherwise, open it up from there. Well, let's open it up to everybody then. That's fine. Jess, yeah.
Jess.
Hi, this was super interesting and I'm very sorry I was a few minutes late. So that made me my first question embarrassing if it was stated when I was not yet here. I want to have a better sense of exactly what your research question is. What is the thing that you want to understand? You have this really wonderful sort of like narrative understanding of these contexts, but I want to understand sort of what is the broader question, in part because there seem like a bunch of different places to go. And one thing that is especially interesting that I've thought a little bit about in other works is thinking about sort of the extent to which countries have different, what I call information capacities, but we could call them something else. We call them technical capacity, right? You talk about infrastructure as varying, right? The nature of the network, right? You also talk about the extent to which there is or is not state-owned comms or ISP, and that limits the extent to which they can or cannot order these things, right? But I would also imagine there's variation in capacity along what kinds of other opportunities are available in terms of control of the movement of information. So internet shutdown is a very like dichotomous tool. It's a blunt force object, right? But those with higher levels of expertise, those governments with higher levels of expertise, right, as you pointed out, could engage in surveillance, but also sort of targeted, right? Either platform shutdown or individual lack of access, right? Which we may expect to be more prevalent in places like democracies where there's large audience costs for these sorts of problems. So all these questions sort of arise based on all of these wonderful, interesting things that you've talked about, but may be more or less relevant depending on how you are thinking about the sort of statement of your research question.
Okay, so the research questions were two.
Okay, so
One is
it was before I got here.
One is a factual one, which is who's doing this and why they say they are doing this. Second one is the legal, political, and technical factors that enable an internet blackout. Cases under study are several ones. I'm just talking now about Russia and the United States, because these are, as I said, this is a book project, and this is the two cases that I have finished at this point. But I have, if my memory is correct, I think there are 3 or 4 more. Now, different platforms. I don't know if you saw, because I said this at the beginning, that this project was not about social networks and was not about other platforms. The Internet Society, I don't know if you got when I was saying that, was giving that definition. So the Internet Society I don't know if the word is mingled, the concept of internet shutdown. When it shut down, they call it like that, I don't. When it's at a national level, which is what I'm talking to you, when it's related to specific platforms, whether it's WhatsApp, LinkedIn, or I don't know, Meta, mention it, whatever you want. So this research is only about the full blackouts, the whole nation states. Why? Because there is already a lot of research about the other episodes, which are episodes of censorship. It's not that they are easier. They may be more common. But the technicalities, the political factors, the legalities, the economies of the censorship is just different. In the United States or in other democracies, and I have seen this, it's not that they prefer to exercise a censorship. The idea of the governments now, I'm not going to block Meta. I am not going to block LinkedIn. I'm going to use them, right? You have these so-called cyber militias where you have a discourse in this side and there is immediately a discourse in the opposite side. So rather than using the censorship, which is what you are referring to, they are just using the social networks. And that is, I am going to kind of refrain myself from giving more comments because I specifically avoided that type of research for this project.
Okay, so that makes me just really quickly think to your civil conflict thing and thinking about the role of when governments do that in the context of civil conflict. You might look at Anita Gode's work.
To what, sorry?
Anita Godes. Anita is her first name, Ghodes.
Ghodes.
And you're probably already familiar with the Citizens Lab, but if not.
Yes, of course.
Great.
So
I saw your hand as well.
follow up on this. So you can think that the government has or doesn't have the capacity to come up with a shutdown, with an internet shutdown, a blackout, and then that's like point number one. And then point number two is like if somebody in the government has the authority, the legal authority to do it or not. Okay, so if you don't have the ability to do it, it's like I would say. That's it. It doesn't matter who has the authority because you cannot do it anyway. So the whole point is, if you have the ability to do it, then you may start considering who is under what circumstance you can exercise that authority. So you come with the political question. Okay? But I was thinking more of a more interesting case that may be applying to Russia. Is like your starting point is that you have limited capacity. So you pass a lot of legislation to build that capacity. And then once you build the capacity, then you start thinking about who should have the authority. And well, because they are kind of a non-democratic regime, they concentrate the authority. Because I think most of the time bills in these areas they are it's not only assigning authority, they are also trying to create capacities, no? So that's maybe interesting to think from that perspective. And then maybe the case of the US is that they're only discussing authority because they assume that the US federal government already has the capacity to do it. So there is no discussion about that to building that capacity because that capacity is already there. The legislators know that. So the only interesting remaining point is like, should we legislate this or not?
Well, I'll see if I can answer, okay? So first of all, in terms of capacity, the Russians build capacity while they build law. One and one. During the 20 years, they were hand in hand. And they just formalize and they say, we have, I'm a sovereign state, and according to the rules of international law, I can do this. And I'm giving the authority to the president or somebody in the executive. That's out of question. Now, in the case of the United States, what was the point? I'm sorry, it was.
So I was thinking that maybe in the case of the United States, so the legislators already assume that the capacity is there, and then they are considering should I legislate this or not. So that's why they are not focusing on building the capacity, or maybe yes, I don't know. Maybe it's part of my ignorance on the topic. Are we building the capacity or not, or are we just discussing about the authority and assuming that the capacity is already in place?
Okay, so capacity is more difficult to do this in the United States than doing it in Russia. So the capacity is there? No, not necessarily. The answer is not necessarily.
Necessary.
Like just that's what I brought up the point of the BART authority episode.
Okay.
The internet was down within the facility and several miles around. And when there was a request to the NSA, which is supposed to be agency in charge of an episode like this, as to what happened, there was never an answer. They were shielded by the Supreme Court. Until today, we don't know what happened.
That doesn't mean there's not capacity. It means they're not going to tell you that they have the ability to shut off
Exactly.
the internet.
But that's
Legislators probably know.
Yeah.
Because they have more
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
information than the public.
that's what I'm asking the questions. Do they have the capacity? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. That episode happened once. It never repeated again.
Yeah, that's because you reveal your ability. They didn't reveal the ciphers during World War II either on purpose because they didn't want people to know they had it.
But still, that's an assumption. I don't have an accurate, I cannot give you an answer.
Maybe another twist on this is that so they are considering legislation to give the authority. Maybe the fear is with that, like if the capacity is not in place, you don't know if as a legislator, you don't know if the capacity is in place or not. But if it's not in place, and I give the authority to somebody in the executive, then they will complete this capacity or build this capacity. So I better don't give the authority. That's why those bills didn't pass.
No, the reason
Legislators were
the reason why the bills did not pass is because you see this in the records of each one of the discussions, is because there's no purpose in passing a new law. Because the law already exists. It's the Telecom Law of 1934. The reasoning was clear. We do not need a new law because there is already a law in place which allowed the president to do this during the World War II.
okay.
The Telecom Law is from 1934. The World War II started in 1939.
So there's no discussion of who has the authority.
Right now, there is
Authority is already.
yes, in the mindset of the legislators in the United States and the executive branches, if there is a need, the president has the authority. There's nothing else to discuss.
But the order of the president has to be executed by the private companies in the US.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah,
that's
because
the
they are-
difference between US and Russia, that you have like this proxy, like a third party in US case, that you have to do it through the company. And in Russia, maybe, but the company is usually probably, yeah, it's just a, so,
And there'd be litigation, but national security deference, especially in this environment. I think we saw three other.
That is right. It's just what it is, right?
We saw three other hands, so maybe please, yeah, and then we'll come around, yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your great presentation. Actually, I'm not really knowledgeable about the topic. I learned a lot. Just I was thinking about actually a little bit different regarding your presentation.
Can you?
For example, I was thinking about when you were giving your actually speech about your topic, I was thinking about a specific societal side. How does actually, I want to give the question first. How does it work for environmental issues? Based on my Turkish experience in Turkey, internet blackout specifically big issue for protests and democratic rights. I think all over the world the same, and also environmental protest and environmental issues. For example, 2016, 2013, Gezi Park. I think the global news all over the world, and then Gezi Park protest. It started in Turkey. We couldn't. Internet blackouts were a big issue. We lost many people. 2016 and 2023, for example, the big earthquake in Turkey and 11 cities were affected by that earthquake and internet blackouts, not to reach out to right and secure information. And also, of course, your topic specific talking about national security. Also, I just wonder how, what we think about, I wonder your, as a scholar, I wonder your perspective or your view about, this kind of right-based issues. How does it work? What US government, think about this? What kind of actual regulations we need to, of course, I understand it. Yeah, this is national security. It is very important. No, because I'm coming from really kind of what is the melting pot? Oh, Middle East. I know. I'm also my background political, and I know that area well. And it's interesting for me because internet blackouts in Turkey, in Europe, the same. Academics very critical. This is the reason to defense or to make it better, but we need to reach out to secure information when we are having big issues, land grabbing in Turkey, for example, hydropower plants, and then also still, specifically I'm talking about the democratic rights regarding any issue. What do you think about this kind of actual topic?
First, I'm going to tell you what I think was the answer to the legislators here to that, and then maybe an alternative. First of all, I think you refer to other aspects of the society that could be affected by an internet blackout. Environmental issues being one of them, human rights being others, maybe supply chain being a lot of activities, just daily activities. Blackouts have an impact. That's why they don't last long, and that's why they are not common. In Egypt, lasted 9 days because they simply could not handle them for longer. When you find a website that says there were 2,000 internet shutdowns, that's censorship. They are not referring to blackouts. They are just not viable. They are not feasible long-term plan. They do have an impact on lots of sectors of the life of the humans. Environmental ones being one of very important ones. I think everybody here will agree with that. Yet, when the legislators were questioning about this, were questioned by members of the civil society, and were questioned by legislators who were against it, the answer was the same always. The national security prevails over everything. That is the geopolitical answer. We need to protect the national interest. I'm repeating just what they say. They need to protect the national interest. Now, what the national interest is? The national interest and the enemies are not the same today that they were in the World War II. Right? The national interest is something that you need to protect the nation state. And the critical infrastructure will prevail over the environment. I don't agree, but that is the explanation. Now, how can we create a different regulation, which I think is the second part of your question? If I'm going to deal, so the justification from the legislators to pass this bill or to attempt to pass this bill was the existence of a massive cyber attack that will damage the critical infrastructure, right? They call it the cyber Pearl Harbor, the cyber 9/11. They were never capable of defining the parameters of the subject. How is this cyber cyber incident, cyber 9/11, exactly what it is. When is that? When is going to take in place? How am I going to characterize it? They never could do it. So instead of being thinking of a massive cyber attack that is going to affect so many sectors and implement a blackout, maybe, and this is the focus of the engineer, is better just to isolate the sectors that have been compromised and leave the rest as they are. So in that way, even though there is affection of the everyday life of the human, the environment and everything else, the impact is going to be less harmful. Rather than focusing in the blackouts, they should be focusing in this, in creating these measures that will deal with these situations instead of trying to create this chaotic, trying to put in place this chaotic decision of public policy.
We have 6 minutes, guys. How many questions do we have?
I think lightning round is called for, so yeah, was there anybody else we missed back here? Yeah, yeah, please, so maybe that, and then Aiton, and then if we have time, I can say
I was
something.
just thinking about, thank you so much, first of all, I mean, it was really fascinating. I was just thinking about like cyber gray spots, in between. For example, you talk about how the state uses internet traffic in America to protect the nation state, and how in Russia it uses to protect the regime, right? And what about places like I'm from Pakistan, where like it's basically the military that controls everything, right? So just thinking about that gray spot, like how do you think about like institutional control instead of like regime or national control over a country's cyber resources or cyber infrastructure? One. Second, I was just thinking about like when, as you said, that there's like it's almost impossible to have like a total national blackout.
Depends where you are. Depends where you are.
Right. So I was just wondering, so in Pakistan, for example, on certain, occasions, all the major cities get like a blackout, but they're not 100% population of the country, right? So would you consider that a national blackout, or would you consider that a localized blackout, or like how would you sort of, think about it? And are there like kind of gray areas in between, like?
So I will start with that question because it's easier to answer. The blackouts are defined to take place at a national level or at a regional level. When they happen at a regional level, most of the time is because there is a national protest or a civil unrest in there. Right? It's the case in India, it happened in Venezuela, it has happened in China, it's always to try to control riots, national protests. Okay? Now, and it happens national and regional. Now, in the case of in the control of the cyber resources, the thing is that the owners of the resources related to the cyberspace can be the state itself, the government itself, like it happens in many countries, or it can be the private sector, like it is here in the United States. But when you have a situation that is supposed to prompt this measure, a blackout, it really doesn't matter. Because once the order comes into place, even the private sector will have to comply. Maybe later on, I think it's in the UK, they are allowed to, after the big episode has happened, they can go for a lawsuit. Here in the United States, they also will do the same. But yet the effect is the same. I am not an expert in institutions, I must say so. But regarding who owns or who controls the critical infrastructure or the cyber resources, as you call them, the effect is going to be the same. Once the executive gives the command, everybody will comply.
So that's why I was asking this, because there were like nationwide protests in Pakistan, and then the military wanted to control it, and they wanted the private sector to shut it down, but they could not have it, but they partially achieved it. That did have impacts on the protest, but that's, you know, I'm kind of thinking about the gray areas in between where you control it, but you cannot control it.
Look, what has been happening is that some of these private companies have moved part of their infrastructure abroad. So when it's abroad, the local government cannot control them. So that portion that is abroad remains functioning. So they really cannot, it's very difficult, that's what I said, to achieve a 100% of control. Now, Pakistan is one thing. Somalia is a very different story. Eritrea, a very different story. So you have on one side the authority of the executive, the abroad portion of that cannot be controlled. But yet, I mean, the scenario is very different. I mean, that's why the type of regime is so relevant at this point. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah.
And before I forget, the shield of the NSA, it was not actually really a 100% shield. There was one word that was not scratching the documents. It's the Standard Operational Protocol 303. That's supposed to be, that's what it's called. It's supposed to be the protocol to provoke an internet blackout in the United States. They just refused to tell us what it was.
Should we end in the final frontier, Aitan?
Just a quick, we don't have time and it is beyond the scope, but internet, the shutdown, you were talking about mainly on the cases where a country does like shut down its own internet, but and especially since you were talking about how it can stop the economy, so a country cannot do it. Internet shutdown could potentially be a weapon. So one country does it to another country, shutting down their internet as part of a conflict, whether it is you want to bring down their economy, or as happened in when Russia invaded Ukraine and they attacked the Viasat, the internet service, the space-based internet service to Ukraine. So.
What you are talking about,
Sort of, so what?
what you are talking about is that the blackouts as a tool of cyber warfare.
Yes, it's a war.
To my knowledge, there has been no case like that so far.
No, but
We can discuss it at a theoretical level, but
Yeah,
I would have publicized, but the US did attacks in North Korean assets after the Sony fiasco. And it's a small footprint.
there was a blackout.
Well, what little footprint they had online, yeah, they did shut down for a period of time, to my knowledge.
Yeah,
But it's limited cases.
There's also a difference between like a cyber attack and like a kinetic armed attack on the infrastructure. And I think there was no case on, for example, like cutting the cables
Yeah.
on the.
Yeah, but that's different.
what we-
That's different. That's different. That's destroying the infrastructure. It's the case of Russia bombing Ukraine. And
Yeah, but what I mean is, it's hard for a cyber attack to amount to like an armed attack under international law. Yeah, that's the whole question. Yeah.
So there is something called in the US, it's not in the legislation, this is at a theoretical academical level, called the defensing forward. Defense forward.
Moving forward, yeah.
Basically, it means to use the internet to attack specific assets of my rivals before they attack me. Under the rules of international law, you only can attack other if you are attacked before, right? So they created this terminology of being under constant attack by China, by Russia. So because I am in a constant attack, I have the right to attack them again, to attack them in advance, to put, I don't know exactly what words to use.
preemptive attack.
Yeah.
It's a defensive.
I think it's like in DOD under
Yeah.
like Article 51, yeah?
Yeah.
The UN Charter.
So I am, as a tool of a cyber warfare, I am not very knowledgeable about it. I mean, I wish I could give you a better answer. There is,
That's fine.
Other.
Yeah, and I think we should continue the conversation, if that's okay, with coffee and with cookies. And we gotta thank our wonderful moderator and you, Patricia, for the excellent presentation. My goodness. But okay, they're still up there. And hopefully this spurred some interest in internet governance. There was a goal to create an internet that was open, secure, interoperable, and global in the 90s. It's none of those things. So the question is, where do we go from here, right? So maybe we could have Adam Siegel out here and continue the conversation. back. I didn't get to see you too, man. I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna jump on a quantum meeting,
I have no.
but I'll be back down in half an hour. Be around, okay?
Can I call it?
Really nice job, Patricia. That was great.